Okay, Freezing Death. Oh, wow. First of all, this is exactly the kind of thing I absolutely wanted to play at this point, which I think you can hear in my voice. You can't tell really how much I like a game and don't like a game by how much I'm enjoying it necessarily. Um, you know, I apply my critique to a game based on how much, how I analytically look at the game from my kind of gestalt view. I don't try to break things up into, okay, on these 10 factors I give it certain ratings. I don't think that kind of thing really helps with a non-rigorous type of study. I'm not trying to come to some overall number that will apply to everyone. No, I'm trying to give you different views. But certainly there's a certain tainting factor to enjoying a game, and I certainly enjoyed playing this. However, that's not at all to say that I think it's not a good game. I just want to give you a little warning here that I had a lot of fun with this, and of course it is a preview copy, so I didn't have to go out and buy it. I don't know how much that affects my ratings at all. I like when people give me games, but I feel like I'm pretty critical with them. So in this particular case, you can't really talk about the components, but these guys always produce really fantastic, well, in the two that I've gotten, they've produced really fantastic prequel kits that kind of show you how, what their view of what the components are really going to be like. The only negatives, the only negative I have to say about even the prequel kit components is the cards are a little tough to shuffle, but I'm sure that's just a matter that they're probably kind of hand assembled. But overall, their kit is just fantastic. I feel like I've got a finished copy of the game, except in this one, I feel like there is a little bit more development work to go. A couple of the rules, and I am hoping that, being given the opportunity to look at this as kind of like, a final playtester look at things or whatever among the final playtester type looks. I hope that they take notes off of what I said through my playthrough, as well as through the actual intro section. Here I'm not going to be able to dig up the particular issues that I had. But there were a couple of issues in the rules where I found myself not absolutely certain that it was nailed down correctly. I felt like I could make pretty good decisions. If I bought this game, I wouldn't be unhappy about the rule book in terms of, oh God, I don't know what to do. And also some of the cards appear to be either useless or to have artifacts on them from a prior design position. I am sure that these things will get cleaned up by the time the game actually goes into production. This is a matter of let's get it out and make sure the Kickstarter can get whatever support that it needs. Okay, so that said, what should we talk about? I think the biggest thing we can talk about is sort of the overall play. So in order to do that, looking at the components is kind of an important thing, because the map tells its own story. This is a CDG, essentially a point-to-point, but the point-to-points are linear tracks, which left me with some worries, because there's the question of, is there enough room to make good decisions? My impression from playing it is that there is enough room to be making sort of big strategic decisions on the front, but if you really want to get into the minutia of the maneuvering through the terrain, a more traditional point-to-point system with more detail is probably better, and a hex map, because it has so many more points essentially, is better than either. But this represents the campaign for the most part. The one exception that I have to that is there's a little bit of capability historically of a little bit of pressure being put on between the fronts. But it's pretty minor. And I think actually at the level of abstraction of the game, it's probably too minor to worry about. The garrisoning at that level, etc., is taken care of by units that are smaller than the units that are represented in the game for the most part. I don't know, the ski units. The ski units are about the same size, but they have a tremendous impact for their size. So, and that's shown in the way the game actually operates. Another big concern I had was, is this just too simple and too light of a CDG? And obviously, I wouldn't have enjoyed it the way I did if it was for me. It's certainly lighter than many others, in part because of the maneuver positions, etc. But I think it gets that light CDG element right. And I'm kind of happy because we're beginning to see these lighter CDGs coming out where there still is enough there to engage you. It's not just sort of the bidding war. The first really light one I saw was 1955. I don't even remember what it was called. It's like a Cold War spy versus spy type of thing. And it was just about the most pared down CDG you can have, where you're basically playing off one track. That was pointless. I found 13 Days very difficult to face. But recently, but another lighter one, although it had a lot of spaces you could play in, was 1960, and then its ilk coming off of it. I've done reviews on a couple of those. But that felt a little heavier, more Twilight Struggle level. Recently, Herman's Fort Sumter, which seems to work okay. It's not, it didn't blow my socks off. This one impressed me more than that. It's got a little bit more meat to it in terms of some of the decisions you're making, etc. Those decisions are interestingly strategic in nature, in the sense that you're not just making strategic decisions because you're kind of at a strategic level of the game, which is kind of how I feel in terms of, I'm trying to think, a little bit that way about Churchill. I feel like my strategic level of decisions has less to do about, I want to focus on this track, although it's still there. With this one, I felt like you're making an early strategic decision to focus on certain tracks, on one of the three, well, let's call it 4 paths, one or more of those paths, and how much force you want to allocate earlier. And you have this interesting sort of pre-war period where you're really setting the stage for that. You're making those decisions well ahead of time. Now, I could see where that could be kind of disturbing because you're not really fighting yet or whatever. I don't know. But I think it's kind of interesting, and it allows for the game to be essentially set up for the war very differently, depending on how you want to play those cards. Now, your initial strategic choices may not be working, and you may have to withdraw from them. You may have to change them. You may have to, modify your plans on the fly, and that's the fun of playing a game instead of just rock, paper, scissors, right? The fact that there's a luck element, a very strong luck element, with this buckets of dice type combat system, and one where attacking is hard and you need to, correlate, or I guess, just not the right word there, but you need to arrange so that you have the right force at the time to play the right card. I'm sure this exists in other CDGs, but because this one's kind of stripped down, I can see it better. I can see that sort of, okay, here's my plan, and it comes out like this, because maybe I'm a little stupid or whatever, but it's at about my speed for being able to make that kind of thinking, especially in a solo game. When I'm playing opposed, maybe I start plotting a little bit better than I do when I'm playing solo. But playing solo with the camera, this was just, so fantastic to do, honestly, which is part of it. It may not, other games that have more complex memory elements about what your intrinsic little tactical plan is or whatever, those fare worse when I'm playing on the camera. Those fare more like I end up doing opportunistic moves. Here, I felt like the thing though is for me when I'm playing opposed, quite often I'm not willing to put that much effort in. For this game actually caught me in probably what smarter people can do in most games, in terms of like planning out what they're going to do in taking it from, okay, I've got a broad strategy in mind to here's how I'm going to affect it to then the mechanical side of things. Usually that second step gets lost for me. This game kind of doesn't have that second step, or whatever. If it does, it's so simple that I can just combine it with the opportunism. And that kind of makes me happy. I don't have to, worry about a lot of little intricate stuff on the tactical level. So actually, really, it's the third step that's missing, the implementation. The implementation becomes that second step. You've abstracted away that much more tactical side of things with the simplicity of just, I just got to push troops into squares and roll some dice. The cards being set up. Speaking of the cards, so yes, the pre-war cards and to some extent some of the other choices that you make set up what the game is going to be like on a broad scale. But I did have some concerns that it might feel a little too scripted, and that's what goes away because of that pre-war period where you kind of set the game up. You're handed the same cards every single game, plus a little bit of random bonus after you get out of the first turn. Basically, though, you have an almost if you were playing this competitively, you have a pretty good idea of what your opponent's hand looks like if you've bothered to study the cards and try to become very good at that. Now, I could see where some people might not like that. I'm someone who likes a lot of randomness, likes a lot of story to unfold and everything, yet I can see the advantage to, okay, I have a pretty good idea what my opponent's choices are. A lot of CDGs throw in so much randomness that it becomes a big impact on the competitive side of things. I think this one actually, the design of how the decks work, puts you to a tighter competitive game. And that would suck if it didn't feel balanced, but you can see, at least even in the playthrough that I had, it came out a draw, How much more balanced can you get than that? It really was a situation where it came down to fighting for every single last square, and everything at the end of the game became vitally important. And you have to then make final choices of like, ooh, do I think I can win the game, or should I just play defensively and try to hold on to the position that I have right now because it's not that bad, and that's present throughout. The Finns especially, it feels, have a real lack of unit counters that starts to become a serious challenge as they start to get late in the game. The Soviets probably have enough unit counters, although I managed to lose most of them on one front, but they probably have enough unit counters that that's not going to be a huge restriction on them. But if they planned poorly in that early stage of the game where they're putting those unit counters down, it's going to be harder to recover from. Unlike the Finns, though, they probably have more opportunity. Their cards give them more opportunities to bring some reinforcements into play if they screwed up. But if they screwed up massively in that initial setup, say they played heavily so there's three military fronts, and then there's a diplomatic front, essentially. That diplomatic front pretty much just moves in one direction. Military fronts should just move in the pro-Soviet direction, but there's some possibility for that to be reversed. But the diplomatic front pretty much just moves in one direction. I didn't see any cards that make the world happier that the Soviets are engaged in a war with Finland. And I can't imagine trying to excuse one. So, but I could see sort of, honestly, I could see one. I could see sort of an isolationism type card or something like that. Something that isn't really related to the war itself, but is related to the world willingness to engage. So that could be an option. But anyway, let me think. Where am I? That each of the tracks that you're going to be engaging on through the game, through various means, most of them military, has a series of victory points located along it, including the diplomatic track, and you're going to, assuming you can't get to an automatic victory, you're going to be adding those up and seeing who won. And as long as you can prevent the automatic victory, which I don't think is hard to do, that's what it's going to come down to, is this sort of, where did you allocate your forces, and, to some extent, how did the dice turn out for you? But I don't feel like, the die rolls could be highly variable. It's a buckets of dice game. If you're throwing enough dice, one person could just, get a huge roll in one direction or another at a key moment and get a big advantage off of that. But buckets of dice create a nice bell curve, so that's unlikely. The most likely place for that to happen is when both sides have not committed very heavily to a front, and that's an easy way to make the game far more variable. I think that's very unlikely to happen. The Soviets, at the very least, are going to probably have troops in fair quantity on each of the three military fronts. So yeah, you have to make these decisions early on as to, okay, which of the military fronts do I want to concentrate on? Now, two of them are more appealing than the others because they can get you to Helsinki, as the Soviets, because they can get you to Helsinki in an automatic victory. But then there's also the diplomatic intervention front, I like to call it, where that's kind of appealing to the Finns because that can get them to an automatic victory as long as they don't lose Helsinki before then. They could be losing the war massively. And so, yeah, you have to make some kind of decision there. Would a broad strategy work? Well, the reason I didn't like the broad strategy and I didn't go with it right away was I was looking at, well, let's get that automatic victory. Maybe I'm shaking too much. I know my camera, basically this table and my camera have a problem. Now I think between the two of them, there's not enough structure. And I think it's when trains go by, given the amount of time that the video shakes. But it may just be me getting animated because, man, I was getting pretty excited there. At least for these days. Most games aren't getting me this excited. I had a lot of fun with this one. So, anyway, you do have this kind of choice, and initially I kind of shunned the idea of splitting my efforts into many directions. The main thing was, let's not lose on any of these fronts to the degree that we lose the war on them, but it probably doesn't make sense to go for a balanced option. But honestly, at this point, I think a balanced option also might work well. As long as you're not losing on the key fronts, you might be able to gain victory points. You might be able to hold things pretty steady and gain victory points even on the worst of the fronts, the far northern front. That might be able to gain you enough victory points to get at least a marginal victory. Now, I don't tend to play games for marginal victories just because whatever I am, But yeah, I do think some additional development work needs to go in just in terms of tightening up some of the rules wording, and definitely in terms of making sure the cards are correct and make sense. Um, there were some ambiguities related to some of the wording choices between the rules and the cards, or at least some confusion spawned in this brain. So that also probably could use some tightening up. But yeah, overall, I thought this was pretty darn good. How many times can you replay it? If you aren't me, probably a lot. I mean, I can see where those initial big strategic decisions as to where you're going to focus that come out in that pre-war period are going to generate such different games that despite the sense of, oh, I'm going to be facing the same, much of the same hand in every game. Every turn, each person is going to be getting their cards for that turn, plus a small amount of cards from the recycled deck. And you do have some deck management in this. How much is it? Well, you usually can't get rid of your really crappy cards, so those are going to be in there to cause you some problems, but there aren't a lot of them. Most of the cards that you will want to play, some of them might be the moderate 2-point cards, but a lot of them are the 3-point cards. And so there's a big cost to playing them. And you might even bake a little bit of luck into your decisions in the early part of the game, because you get in the first pre-war turn, which is several years, 35 to 38. The next one's most of 39, and then you go on a month-by-month basis for the actual war. That first deck of cards gives you some nice 3-point cards that you can play to good effect for the 3 points on that first turn, and you might get another shot to trigger that event off that you want. On the other hand, if that event is absolutely vital to your strategy, play it in the first turn you get it. That might be the only chance you have of seeing it when you can play it, because those events become unplayable once the war actually starts. That's one of the big rules that is not clear, because one of the cards appears to not be able to be played because, as far as I can tell from the rules, the war starts when you enter that December turn, and it's a December card that you cannot play unless you're at peace. So I had to kind of make up rules for that. That's one of the things that bugged me. One of the cards had a reference to a card that I don't have. I hope, I don't know which way is better, honestly. It could be possible that I just don't have it in this set. Maybe whoever had this set before me ate it or something. But I suspect it's much more likely that there's an error in this current set that will be rectified by the time it goes to final production. So, yeah, there aren't a whole lot of games that I'm aware of on the Finnish Winter War. The only one that I've played is SPI's Winter War. And obviously, there's a Europa game on it, and probably whatever Diffraction Entertainment probably has one too. But Winter War was an absolute classic, but this provides you with a very different view. A little bit less tactical decision, but a better feel for the strategic situation. And then, the more modern type of decision making that a CDG provides you with. It's one thing that I really like about both the games that one of the designers has been involved in. NT is, I believe, the same guy who did the Brother versus Brother, which is also by them, and I had fun with that as well, covering the post-World War I Russia-Finnish war. One thing that I like that he's doing, and I don't know if I've seen it before, But a lot of CDGs have reaction cards. These two designs also have them, but they don't just sit in your hand where you know you might have your hand face down and just forget you have it or whatever. Instead, what you do is you have to play them face up, basically alerting your enemy to the fact that you have this reaction. And then it sits out there and can be played again, and can be played for its effect rather than as a card during your opponent's turn. I like that simply because I have trouble remembering, especially solo, but even opposed, to be looking at my hand when my opponent's going and thinking, oh, if he plays that, I can react. And I bet you I'm giving all kind of tells off if I'm doing that anyway. And I think most people do. I don't even bring my sort of poker face to a war game usually. I'm usually like probably just focusing on my card, looking at it, thinking, yeah, he's going to do it. Because I won't remember if I'm not looking that hard, right? Well, this gets rid of all that problem. It's just right out there, face out in front of me. I might forget it, but I got to tell you, most people I'd play with, and certainly me with most people, most situations I'd be playing in, would say, hey, you sure you don't want to do that if they think I've forgotten it or I think they've forgotten it. So that makes it a little easier. Anything that's hidden information that you can kind of screw up, I will, whether I'm playing opposed or not. But anyway, yeah, this one's really, really cool. So far I'm impressed with both the games they put out. I think I like this one better. This one kind of excites me more because of that lighter nature. It doesn't feel like any other CDG that I've played. The combination of the scripting, the very clear strategic choices early in the game and how they're going to impact you throughout the game, stripping away so much of the more tactical decision making. It really gave me it gave me perhaps the cleanest view of what is good about CDGs, as opposed to other things. And I feel like at this level of abstraction, the CDGs actually work pretty well. I think if you abstract it any more than this, you start getting into trouble, and abstracting it less, you start focusing too much on opportunism and too little on the strategic plan, if you're me at least. Anyway, that's it. Not that I dislike a lot of the other, Here I Stand is just beautiful. All right, let's send it up.